everybody. Gonna make sure that we're running before we get started. Let's see. There we go. Gonna enlarge that so hopefully I can see comments. No, it did not work. That's okay. That did. And I will try and keep up with your comments. Okay, it's 4:30. If you are watching live, just pop in the comments and say live. Let us know you're watching. And thank you for being here. So I am Cassie Neiman. I am a You Can Row To Master Rowing Instructor with Concept 2. And I am here to bring you a few common errors and some tips and cues to fix those things. Now, oftentimes, if we have a Facebook group called Row Strong and people will post their rowing, maybe 30 seconds, and they'll just get this overwhelming response of things to fix. And it could be a lot. And it's great. Everybody's being super nice and everybody wants to kind of give you as many tips as possible. But what I would like to do is try and simplify things down and just pick out a few things and talk about that because, your rowing journey is kind of like a lifetime thing. So you're always going to be fixing something, and that's okay, right? That keeps us on our toes and makes us better movers and better rowers and probably better people. Cool. We're working. So the 3 common errors that I'm going to bring you today, they're written on the wall there if you can see it, but they aren't ones that we've covered quite as much as maybe some others, but you'll see that everything is interconnected. And really my goal when it comes to teaching people how to row and to teaching people how to teach people how to row, because that's what we do at You Can Row To. We do both of those things. I like to simplify and I like to start with the biggest most important parts of the stroke that kind of prioritize, because oftentimes if we're trying to fix something up at the top where maybe they're moving too fast back and forth in an upright position, and instead of trying to get them to slow down, really we need to talk about form and the order of operations. So we need to prioritize the cues and start from the bottom of that pyramid and build up. So some of these things are working in that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over these things. I'm going to go over the common error. I'm going to go over some tips and cues that I often provide in my own coaching, in my own videos, and then also in the Row Ready program that is available. It's a 6-week program with a lot of, with 24 workouts, a lot of videos, cues, tips, just like these. And then I'm going to answer some questions. So if you pop in there and ask a question now, I'll hopefully be able to get to it afterwards. But all right, let's hop in. Okay, number 1, and this is something that I talk about a lot, position on the seat. Okay, so when you come to get on your rowing machine, the most important thing that you do is 1, make it yours. So you don't want to row in the setting of the person before you. If it's in your house, then you just keep it as at your setting. But if you're in a gym where lots of people are using the machine, you need to set it for yourself. And that means setting the damper. So the lever on the side, we want to put that between a 3 and a 5. You can experiment with where you like it for whatever length that you want and so forth. I'm not going to go into the damper a whole lot today. 2, you're going to put your feet so that the strap is at the ball of your foot, the widest part of your foot, kind of the top of your shoelaces where the toes meet the knuckle. That's where we want the strap. But the 3rd thing is where your butt is on the seat. And I'm going to show you what I usually see what people do, right? They come in, they sit down, they put their feet in. They may have the damper in the right place, their shoes in the right place. They sit down, they grab the handle, and they start rowing. And so what happens is they're going to end up in a position that's not as effective to produce a lot of force. And what we're trying to do is produce force into the machine so that it moves and we can move through a distance efficiently, quickly, strong, safely, all those things. So what I would say to you for that position on the seat, right? When I just sit down like this, what happens is that I've got this little rounding of my butt. I'm sitting up high on my butt, right? And when I get up into the catch position here, my knees are going to be higher up because my butt is scooped underneath me. And I'm probably not going to get in the best catch position because my ankles are not going to be quite as mobile in this position. So if you've been sitting on the machine and saying, I just am lacking in mobility, right? It may be true, but it may also be the way that you're sitting, okay? So if you're saying my ankles aren't mobile enough for me to get to the front of the catch position or my hamstrings are too tight, try this and see if it makes a difference. So what you're going to do is same thing, put your feet in, put your shoes in. Put your feet in, set the damper. You're going to straighten your legs. This is important. And then reach over and touch your toes. And I like to do this first just because it's like, okay, I'm sitting down and stretching, but also so you can see the difference. Then you are going to literally pick your butt cheeks up and pull them backwards. I don't mean pull them apart, okay? Some people have thought I meant that. I don't. I mean pull it backwards, right? So you kind of walk your hips back, which is going to tilt your pelvis into a more neutral position. So instead of me sitting back on my low, with my low back rounded, I'm going to be sitting up nice and tall with my sit bones down into the seat. And my legs are straight. You can't do this without your legs straight. Now when I reach over and touch my toes, I'm going to get a much bigger stretch in my hamstrings, and I'm going to get a little bit better of a hinge. Okay? Now I'm in the position that I want to be to row. So now when I go up and grab the handle, I can get into a much better catch position. My heels are almost all the way down with my shins almost vertical there. And I don't feel like I'm going to be putting all that force into my low back. Okay, so let's look at the difference. So this is that good catch position. If I walk my booty forward, right, this is my catch position. Do you see the difference? So from here, right, from the hip to the shoulders is a little bit straighter than when I'm here. This position doesn't look quite as strong, does it? When I walk my hips back, it is. And yes, you can do that with your knees bent, but it's much easier to get into that right position when you do it with your legs straight, okay? So I would highly recommend that you do it back here. Now, while you're rowing, you may start to shift a little bit, right? And all you can do is on that recovery, just walk your hips a little. Just reset, right? If you find that things are kind of starting to scoop underneath, reset, all right? There's no reason why you can't do that. So this is one of the things that I harp on all the time. Because if you just did this, your stroke is going to improve massively. So if you are watching someone row and they're not getting a whole lot of reach at the front end because they're trying to hinge from their hips, but really what they're doing is hinging from their low back, then you have them adjust their butt on the seat. They're going to be in a better catch position. If you have someone that is hitting their knees, maybe as they come up to the front, their knees are all up in their face, it may be that, again, they need to adjust their seat. If you have somebody that's not able to get full compression because their ankle mobility, have them adjust their seat, okay? So it kind of fixes a lot of things, and it's before you even start rowing. So the top line there, it says, literally, hashtag, literally pick your butt cheeks up. So go ahead and hashtag that on everything, right? And I mean up and back, not out. Okay, so that is my favorite cue. And again, something that I recommend all the time before going into a whole bunch of other issues because it might fix them. Number 2, the lifting of the toes. So oftentimes what I'll see, I'm adjusting my butt cheeks right there, is when someone's rowing, their toes are going to come up at the finish. See how my toes are lifting? That's what I want you to look at right here. So right at the finish, the toes lift. That's one way of this happening. The other way is on the recovery. So they may stay down, but then they come up on the recovery. And if you noticed, when I picked my toes up to come back into the recovery, I came flying back up into there, right? Now, let's remember what this is called. It's called a drive and a recovery. So if on the recovery I am flinging my body back up there, I'm probably not doing a bunch of recovering. So let's talk about this. When you are rowing, you want to keep your feet connected to the foot stretcher. And by that, I mean they are touching the whole time. When you lift your toes up, and if you just sitting here watching me on Facebook, right, or on wherever you're watching me, pick your toes up. If you're just sitting in a chair, pick your toes up. What turns on, right? It's here. And that is muscle, that's work that doesn't need to be done, okay? So we don't need to kind of waste any energy on this part of the stroke, on the recovery. Also, when we're at that finish position and the toes come up, now we've turned everything on this anterior side of our body, right? So up into our quads, into our hip flexors, and then more than likely into your low back as well, okay? Common theme here, readjusting your butt cheeks, picking up your toes. All these things tend to just sit right here in your low back. Number one common complaint of rowers is low back pain. So let's not let that happen to you. So here's what I would like you to pay attention to. When you are driving out of the catch, I want you to think about keeping your toes down. You're going to get the whole foot down and push through it as you go back. The key here is not opening up too soon. When you go to that open position, you're going to put a lot of stress here in the hip flexors and the low back, and it skips the big muscle movers in your body, your legs. So what you need to do in the drive is keep the body over and drive with the legs, then open the body and pull the arms in, okay? So up at the catch, when you're here, thinking about keeping the body over, the shoulders in front of the hips, driving the legs down, then swinging the body and pulling the arms in. What happens is a lot of people want to pull with their upper body, and that tends to pick the toes up. And when those toes lift and all that work goes into the hip flexors, like I said, it's going to end up here in your low back, but it's also going to end up here in your quads. And so if you're finding that, at some part early into your kind of intense rowing that your legs are kind of blowing up, especially in your quads, then it's likely that you're lifting up the toes. We want to keep that work in the hips, in the glutes, in the hamstrings, and the quads. They participate, right? They're still involved, but they're not doing everything. So we want to make sure we're using all the muscle mass here. That's why rowing's so great, because it uses so much muscle mass, okay? So when we're up at the catch, keeping that body over into the halfway down the drive, open the hips, then pull in the arms. Now, the second part of that is when you get to the finish, not letting yourself fall away and letting the toes come up. So keeping the body over and keeping those toes connected as you move through the finish. So we don't want to see the toes come up at all, because the second part of this is when those toes come up at the finish, what then happens is we use them to pull ourselves back up, okay? And what that does is, one, it creates a little bit of instability here at the finish. So your abs are going to end up doing a lot more work. Your hip flexors are engaged. I can feel them. And then we end up doing a whole bunch more work on the recovery. So when we keep the feet down into the finish and back into the recovery, we end up not taxing our body in ways that's unnecessary. Was that too many negatives? Not taxing our body in ways that are, yeah, that was right. So we want to make sure that we're not doing more work than we have to. So my cue for that was a long way of saying that if you find as you're rowing that your toes are coming up, and this is great because you know what? You can see your toes, right? As you're rowing, there may be some things you can't see, right? You can't see how far you're getting your body over, where your hips are, things like that, unless you have a mirror or you video yourself. But you can see your toes. So take your feet out, put them on top of the straps, grab the handle, and then we're going to do some feet out rowing. Now, the first time you do this, you may fall off at the back, right? Back here. So, row slow. This is a drill, and it's meant to be done slowly, deliberately, and with control. And what you're going to find is that your recovery is going to be much more controlled, and you're not going to end up overtaxing your hip flexors and putting that stress in your low back. Because up at the catch, you are not pulling with the upper body. Your body, the way the rowing machine, the stroke works with this rowing machine, is that you are going to push through your feet. And that is coming from here. It's going to travel up through the legs, right? This is what's doing that initial drive. Then it's going to transfer from the lower part of your body through your hip flexors into your upper body. That's that swing portion. The handle moves further. And then the last little bit is your arms come in. So it's a long chain from your foot all the way up through your body, through your arm, into your hands, into the handle. So if my first move is to open here, I've basically bypassed all of this. So don't leave out the biggest part of your stroke. And a big key for seeing if you're doing that is by looking at your toes. And the good fix for that is rowing with your feet out. So again, back up at the catch, rowing nice and slow, coming up to the catch, and keeping the feet connected the whole time. Now you may find that you have to be a little bit quicker at the finish. Can't hang out back here because your feet will come up, right? And your recovery is going to be a lot slower because you don't have your toes to pull yourself back up. And that's fine, okay? All right, so that is one of our favorites, the feet out drill. It's kind of a fix-all, and we love it. I would not recommend that you then now spend the next 12 workouts that you do on the rowing machine with your feet out. I just mean this is a drill, and it should be done from time to time, slow and controlled, and then put your feet back in and row. So don't decide, okay, now I'm going to row a 10K with my feet out. There's a time and place for that, but not right now, okay? Number 3, pausing at the finish. Now, this also stems from the same thing we were just talking about, opening the body too soon and ending up back here, taking your breath, and then going back up to the front. So a pause, and then row. And a pause, and then row. There's 2 reasons, well, there's a lot of reasons why I don't like this, but I'll give you a few. The first reason is that typically comes from that same type of stroke where you are really cranking on it with the upper body into that finish position. And again, you're missing out on the legs. And this, I see this a lot with people that do other hip-driven exercises, kettlebells, Olympic lifts, anything in that kind of range, or maybe have a lot more upper body strength. They end up wanting to really use that hip swing in the upper body initially instead of the legs. So what happens is they're going to pull way back to here, take a breath, and then come right back up and get that big stroke. The other kind of thought process with that is the break, right? You get this rest at the backside. So oftentimes this happens because the body is opening up too soon. But the other reason that I don't like this is because we get to that finish position, and if you listen, you can hear the wheel, right, that flywheel, and then we rush back up to the front. And then we drive real hard, and then we rush back up to the front. So what happens is now you're doing work on both ends of the stroke. You are pulling yourself back up in that recovery and driving hard. Pulling yourself up and driving hard. So the only break, the only recovery you're getting is back here at the finish. So of course you want to take it. What I would argue is that the way this machine works is we want to try and find a stroke rate a damper setting that keeps that flywheel moving, keeps it spinning consistently and constantly. We don't want it to move, we don't want it to spin and stop, spin and stop, spin and stop, spin and stop. We want it to spin and get that nice hum, right? And so what happens when you're here, it's slowing down, and then I come back up, and it's slowing down. So I am building up speed on each of these. Now, as I'm rowing normally, or I would say correctly, it slows down as well. It doesn't keep moving, even when I'm doing it in this way. But as it's slowing down, I am preparing for the next stroke. So the time in which I take from the finish to taking the next stroke is reduced, meaning the wheel has less time to slow down. So I should be able to go further in the same amount of time, or be able to row harder for whatever distance it is. So what we're trying to do is keep the hands moving. They come in and back out. Doesn't mean they need to fly out, right? We don't need that to happen. But they're just a constant movement back and forth that doesn't stop. Because the hands and the arms do the least amount of work in our stroke, so they need the least amount of rest. The legs do the most amount of work, so they get all this rest, right? They come down, they're chilling, go. The hip swing, it's about 50-50, right? So, one drill I like to do for this is called cut the cake. I really don't know why it's called cut the cake, but cake sounds nice. So the way it's going to work is you start up at the catch, and you're going to drive through. You're going to go arms and body only, back to the finish, and then a full stroke. So arms and body, full stroke. So every other stroke is just arms and body. And the reason why I like this for kind of working on that pause at the finish is because it's just a reiteration of that order of operations that forces you to keep those hands moving and understand that the arms and body aren't doing a whole lot in your stroke. They're not doing nearly as much as your legs. So that is called cut the cake. And I like that drill for a lot of reasons, but that is one specifically. So if you are troubleshooting your stroke, the first thing I would suggest is that you look at the way you're sitting on your seat. Adjust your butt cheeks so your sit bones are down, and make sure your feet are in the right place. Then I would say focus on the things you can see, right? You can see where the damper is. You can see where your feet are. You can make sure that your hands are at the end of your handle. Pinky's almost falling off, not in here. Okay, that's also helpful. And you can pay attention to what your toes are doing. If you see them lifting up, say, oh, I think I'm doing some extra work there. Take your feet out, do some feet out drill, see if we can kind of troubleshoot that. And then pay attention to your stroke, whether you are pausing at the finish or alternatively pausing at the catch, right? This stroke is just a constant flow going back and forth. Doesn't mean it's going back and forth like this, but it is constantly moving because we want that flywheel to constantly move. So those are kind of 3 maybe new cues to you to look at your rowing. Now, I could go on forever about the order of operations of getting your arms away and then the body to follow and then the legs. There's so many more things that we could go into. But I wanted to bring these specific 3 things to just shed some light on those things that you can see and you can start to troubleshoot by yourself. And then also, if you are a coach and you're coaching others, you can pinpoint what might be happening based on just a few different movements. Because again, we're trying to make better rowers, but also better coaches. And yeah, so those tips and cues and drills are all in the Row Ready program. And they are explained even further and then applied to specific workouts. So if you like getting into all that stuff, which you should, because it makes your own stroke better, then I would highly suggest checking it out. Just because there isn't anything else that is so cohesive and linear in the learning process. So whether you are an advanced rower or a new rower or a coach, or you just want to start putting your clients on rowing machines, this is a great program to kind of teach you all the things that you want to look for. All right, so I'm going to look and see if we have any questions, and if we don't, that's cool, but if anybody does have any questions, you can pop them in there, and I'll keep talking for a few minutes to see if anybody does. And if not, please just post them in the comments, because I am always checking back and I can answer them. I would highly suggest looking at our Row Strong Facebook group. I do form checks for rowing in there. Lots of other people will comment on it as well, but I try and definitely comment on it. And that's a great way to have somebody look at your rowing form without leaving the comfort of your home. And just set up a video or a camera and video yourself for 30 seconds or so. And it's really helpful. And then the other thing is, I would say, is check out the Row Ready program. It's available through You Can Row Too. And you can find it in the link in our Instagram profiles, if nowhere else. I'm sure we'll post it in the comments. And yeah, and I think I got a question. Okay. What's the number one error you see in new rowers? The number one error I see in new rowers is not using their body, not getting a hip swing. So this stems from coming and sitting on the machine in this very upright position, right? So that my butt is scooped underneath me. And so when I row, there's no indication that I should use my body, because I may think I'm using my body. I'm using my body, right? I just can't move it very far because of the way I'm sitting on the seat. So usually the number one thing I see is that they're just not sitting in a position that makes them effective. So if you just adjust, oh, now I can swing my body. Often that may not lead to automatically getting a good body swing. They may still row very vertically like this, but at least it allows for the opportunity for that to happen. And there was one thing I wanted to say about rowing kind of higher on your butt here. You just sit down and start rowing. What you might end up with is one of those little burns on the back of your butt, right, kind of like high up above your butt. And it's like a rash, and it hurts. And every time you row, it gets worse. So if you're getting those, then you need to adjust your butt. I'm not saying that it's like all sunshine and roses on your butt cheeks if you're rowing tons of meters every day. But if you're getting one of those rashes kind of up here high on your butt, then it is likely that you are sitting too far up on your butt and you're rounding. And that rash is the least of your problems, because it's going to end up hurting your back. So that's the number one thing I see. Let's see. So Lynn says she really likes that when I broke it down, in that the drive is 60% of the stroke, the hips are 30%, and the arms are 10%. And what I was explaining about the recovery is, if you think about it, how much work they're doing, that's how much rest they're going to get on the way back up. So if the arms do 10%, then they only get 10% of the rest, which basically means very little. And then the hip swing, you only got this kind of little break here, it swings back forward, but the legs stay down the longest. And so that's helpful to think about how you break down this stroke. It's also just how you're the most effective mover. It's the same way that you squat, the same way you pick up things up off the ground, you move your friend's couch, whatever it is. That breakdown is the same, because all we're doing is producing force against an external object, and we want to do that with the most effective parts of our body. All right. Looks like we've posted in there the Row Strong Facebook group, my lovely literally pick your butt cheeks up hashtag. and yeah, so like I said, leave questions in there. This is, again, not the extensive list of common errors. It's simply 3 that I just wanted to pinpoint today, because I haven't done it specifically in this way before. And I felt like it would be a nice, interesting conversation. So I hope you enjoyed it. And if you're watching it later, just leave a comment and let us know that you watched it. Share it with others. We're going to bring you a lot more of this stuff. And if you have any questions about Row Ready, let us know. We're happy to answer. It is, in my opinion, one of the greatest ways to start rowing. And if you have a buddy who's like, hey, I just got my hands on a rowing machine, where do I start? This is a great place to start. So send it to your friends, your mom, your neighbor, whoever. All right. Thank you again for watching. And I will see you guys sometime soon.